Good afternoon, all. Welcome to today's session on breaking barriers with research-led communications. I'm assuming most people attending today's session are conscious of the role of research in strategic communications. Our panelists today will be speaking about how organizations can use research to create impact, showcase real human insights, and help drive important changes for the world around us. We'll discuss the imperatives for Essity to place a research-led communication strategy at the heart of its brand purpose. We'll also go behind the scenes of the UK's largest menopause study and see how the insights are driving communications that are playing a key role in breaking barriers to well-being for topics of global interest, including menopause. Let me very quickly introduce this brilliant panel in the order that they are presenting. Speaker one is Gareth Lucy. He's Communications Director, Essity UK and ROI, and he'll be speaking about the value of research-led communications. Gareth has more than 18 years of experience creating large-scale multi-market communications campaigns for some of the world's most diverse, most well-known products and brands. Our speaker two is Harry Gove, and he's the research director at OnePoll, and he will be speaking about crafting research that meets with clients' objectives. Harry heads international market research projects at OnePoll, and he works collaboratively with organizations to ensure that the research helps create and drive impactful communications. Our speaker three is Katie Ireland, and she's campaigns director at 72 Point. And she'll be speaking about using research to build a PR campaign. Katie is the former Sun journalist and TV news producer. She now leads the campaigns team at 72 Point. Just a few housekeeping points. The session is being recorded. Closed captions have been enabled. All participants have been muted. So if you'd like to, make some suggestions or comments or ask questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the comments, and we'll come back to the questions at the end of the sessions. Without much ado, let's get started. Gareth, would you like to start, please?
Yes, thanks, Sudha, and hi, everybody. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can see this now. So hi, everybody, and thanks for joining today. As Sudha said, so my name is Gareth Lucy, and I'm the Communications Director at Essity for the UK and Ireland. And I just thought I'd start very briefly by introducing Essity. We often say that we're probably the biggest brand that nobody's heard, that you've never heard of. And the reason for that is we were established in 1929, but up until 2017, we were known as SCA. And in 2017, the company was split in two, and the brands and products side became Essity. So as a corporate brand, we're actually only just under 6 years old. But hopefully many of you will recognise some of our brands and products on the right-hand side there. But we're a global hygiene and health company. We operate in around 150 countries, and we have around 46,000 employees worldwide. We're headquartered in Stockholm, Sweden. But in the UK, we have 3 commercial offices and 6 manufacturing sites. That's just a very brief introduction to who we are and what we do. As Sudha said, what we're here to talk about today is how we've used a research-based approach and strategy to drive our communications agenda. And there are a couple of reasons why we do that. First one is relevancy. I think sometimes it's a key business requirement that you have to drive a connection between your brand and a particular area. That might be sustainability, that could be diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for the sake of today's call, what we're going to be talking about is why we did that, where we were trying to drive relevancy between the Essity brand and the category of menopause. Another reason we use it is because once you've driven that relevancy, you then need to create credibility for your brand. And again, we'll talk a little bit more around this as we go through the presentation. Another reason is justification. So sometimes research and insights is a great way to justify a particular business decision that you've made. You could be trying to justify a recommendation to a retailer to stock a particular product or to give you certain promotional space. Or it could just be a business decision internally that you're trying to demonstrate to your employees that it's a long-term innovative choice that the business is making, and these insights and research can help back that up. It might be that you're trying to show category leadership. Again, really important when it comes to retailers, but also really important in other areas, such as with healthcare professionals. People and customers are looking out for organisations to show leadership, to bring new information and new insights into the market. And research is a great way to do that. And finally, to drive news, having lots of different insights through research gives you several different headlines, can often give you new news to go out and talk about your products and your brands. The other thing is when research is done really well, then it should provide you with a gateway to content. So these are just some examples that we've used when we've had new insights and new research, different ways that we have generated content to reach different audiences. So we've taken research and we've built podcasts around that research, bringing in experts to discuss it. Infographics, downloadable packs of videos. You will know as well as I do, there are so many different options open to us for content and different channels where we can place that content that help us reach different audiences. But when you've got some really in-depth, credible research, then it's a great way to help you build longevity in the content that you produce. So I talked a little bit about how we use research to build credibility in certain areas or in certain categories, and that's really important. But of course, that can only be achieved if the research itself is credible, and that's a really important aspect. And sort of want to use this point here to kind of distinguish between what I would call research-led communications and survey stories. And that's not a criticism of survey stories in any way. You know, I've certainly used them in the past, and they can be a great way to get some very quick and simple press coverage around a particular subject. But when you put research at the heart of your comms plan and your comms strategy, then you should be able to achieve so much more with it. You know, it should provide you with genuine insights that can be utilised, yes, for media coverage, but also internally. You know, whether that's to provide useful insights for your product development team, for your marketing teams where you're building campaigns around a particular product or brand, and also with externally with customers, with retailers, or with healthcare professionals. You should be able to take very credible research and insights to them and use it as a reason to start a conversation or to engage on a matter. So that is the difference really for me in terms of having a really kind of credible bit of research and a quick survey story. I think in addition, you should be able to build multifaceted communications plans around it. So again, not just you know, some PR that's here today, gone tomorrow, but build longevity around internal communications, social media, digital, and all of these different elements. As I said, you know, it should take your PR results far beyond the sort of small nib of coverage that you can sometimes get with a survey story, and it should take it to the point where you're driving conversations and building debate. You know, when you take some of the products that we make at Essity, products related to menstruation and incontinence, these are sometimes quite taboo subjects, and what we're looking for is to drive conversations that break down those taboos and enable people to feel confident and comfortable talking about subjects that they otherwise would have potentially hidden away. And of course, really important, but it should build your corporate reputation in a way that you are wanting to. You know, we all need to try and position our organisations in a particular way, in a particular category or several categories, and credible, solid research should help you do that. And just a final point there, really, that if you're in an organisation like Essity, where you've got international elements to it, then often if research is done really well, then it can have international relevancy as well. So it's all very well saying that you need credibility, but how do you go about achieving it? And there are many ways that you can do this, but I just thought I'd talk through some of the ways that we've used in the past. So one of the things we've done quite regularly is we've brought in established and trusted third parties to help us with the research questions. You know, we might not be the experts, or we wouldn't portray ourselves as being the experts in certain areas. So bringing somebody in who is an expert, who can help you ask the right questions, unlock the right insights is really critical. An important point, of course, is that you have a very established and trusted research partner. We know how the media can react when you have a piece of research from a less credible partner. So when you're bringing somebody with you into your comms plan who has credibility, and you know their research is seen as strong and credible with media, then you've almost got over the first hurdle. I talked a little about bringing in experts to help you ask the right questions. I think once you've got the research back, once again, turning to experts to ask you to interpret the data is really important. What we think could be the most interesting headline or most interesting insight might not be the kind of really key thing for that particular audience, and having an expert come in and highlight that for you can really help you adapt how you communicate the insights that you've got. One of the things we've done is we've taken our research and we've published them into formal reports. So again, it just takes it that step further, where it gives it more credibility that it's a published document to present to people. And finally, just one point here that something we've done in the past that's worked really, really well is we've invited experts to provide independent and unbiased commentary on the findings. One in particular I'd like to give an example of there on the right-hand side is Ella Daish, who many of you will know is quite a active anti-plastics campaigner. And of course, in hygiene and health, lots of products contain plastic or are in plastic wrap for hygiene reasons. We asked Ella to comment on a big sustainability study that we did, because I think it showed that we were looking to have all opinions, and it was, we printed Ella's opinion, as she gave it. We didn't change it and we didn't hide away from it. And I think sometimes that's a great way to build credibility in an area. So I won't for this too much, because I know Katie's going to go into a lot of detail around the PR and media side of this menopause case study that we're talking about today. But just as a very brief overview, we commissioned the UK's biggest ever study on menopause back in October last year. We collaborated with Dr. Naomi Potter, as I said, to kind of help us ask the right questions and to interpret the data correctly. We had 5,000 females participating in the study via OnePoll. So that was 2,500 females before they'd experienced menopause or symptoms of menopause, and 2,500 afterwards, to give us that kind of interesting look at the perception versus reality. The key thing for us as Essity, and why this was part of our strategy, is it was driving 3 key business priorities for us. We were launching a new brand called Isviva, which is a specific brand built around menopause and relieving symptoms of menopause. Our Tenor brand was extending the category beyond incontinence but into menopause. And of course, from a diversity, equity and inclusion perspective, menopause is something that our female employees will experience during their working lives. And we want to make sure that as a company, we're supportive of that. So there was 3 key points for us really in delivering this programme that were crucial to our wider business strategy. It was a 2-phase plan. So the first phase was the research findings and the education around what we discovered. And then the second phase was about really driving those conversations and changing the perception versus the reality and the understanding of that. And as I said, it started here in the UK and in Brazil, where we were launching the Isviva brand. It's now being scaled up in 2023 into several different markets throughout the Essity world. And here you can just see some of the media coverage that was delivered. And the highlight really was an 8-minute segment on Lorraine, which of course is on primetime TV. So just to summarise, really, I think there's 3 really key points. Be really clear on your communications objectives before you're commissioning the research. Understand what insights you're trying to generate, and most importantly, what insights are going to be useful to your target audiences. I think that's the critical bit. And what can your target audiences do with those insights? I've talked a lot about credibility, but it really is important. You don't need a famous name attached to your research. I just think you need a credible name. And if you're asking for input, particularly commentary on the results, recompense for time, of course. Never expect people to work for free, but not for narrative. Don't pay people to say something. Take what they're saying is genuine and use that. And lastly, leverage all of the insights you get to build a really multifaceted communications campaign. You're going to have different audiences, and that will take you into public affairs, into internal comms, digital, B2B, social media. When you've got a rich bank of insights, it enables you to do that, and that's key for me. That's everything I wanted to share, so thank you very much, and I will stop sharing now and pass back to you, Sudha.
Thank you, Gareth. That's very interesting. Harry, would you like to go next?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Sudha. Share my screen quickly. Everyone, so I'm Harry. I'm Research Director at OnePoll. I've been for about 5 years now and Research Director for the past year. And I'm just going to chat about this from the researcher side, about how we can craft research that meets client objectives. So I've actually been working with Gareth since late 2021 on a whole range of different projects. And I've just found it really exciting and interesting to work with a brand who has this really clearly defined brand vision of breaking barriers to well-being. Over the time we worked together, we've undertaken research on kind of a variety of topics, but mostly those that fall into diversity, sustainability, and women's health. Within that, we've done some quite interesting things, covering eco-friendliness and diversity in the workplace for office workers, impacts of the cost of living crisis on people's ability to be sustainable and eco-friendly at home, and a really interesting piece on period poverty. We also more recently kind of took some internal diversity, equity and inclusion research for Essity's UK and Irish branches. We sort of worked with an external consultant to analyse the outcomes of that and what it meant for Essity as a company. As Gareth mentioned as well, in autumn 2022, we collaborated on their menopause research, which was just a fantastic project to be a part of. It's important to say that regardless of the theme of a piece of research, the same considerations need to be taken to ensure that that research is of high quality and provides useful insight. But within that, of course, depending on the sensitivity of the topic, the markets, the respondents being polled, there's going to be sort of nuance of how you handle it. Understanding the business objectives is really key before moving forwards with the project. And we think it's kind of the marked difference between just a headline or a survey story, as Gareth said, and an actual piece of research that's going to provide value to a business, long after it's fallen out of the press. This is something which needs to be placed at the front end of project design to ensure that the work which follows aligns with those business objectives and that there's a plan for how the results are going to be handled. It's kind of important at this point, though, to say that that doesn't necessarily mean writing up the stats before the research has gone out and, forcing yourself down a narrative path, which the results are not necessarily going to align with. Instead, this is more about taking time to consider the angles that you're interested in, trying to cover all those areas off, but a willingness to change with the data if it doesn't come out as expected. Now, as someone working in this industry, it's important to be aware of your own gaps in knowledge or unconscious biases, and then work with others to get around those. In the case of the menopause research, for example, both Gareth and myself are men, so working on a project like this is going to require working with a more diverse team to actually drive the creative process and the resulting survey in the correct direction. And if we hadn't worked collaboratively like this, then we certainly wouldn't have come out with the high quality research which we did. So in this case, an unconscious bias might be perhaps assuming that all the women answering the survey are going to know the difference between perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, these different stages that we're talking about. But there's actually many reasons why that may not be the case. And that's something that we found with our research, that it's not necessarily the case. So we can't just make these assumptions. That, of course, needs to be balanced with the need for research to be impartial, for questions not to be leading, having neutral phrasing, including definitions. So the example of the question up on the screen there from the menopause research is kind of what we feel was a good way to do this. We've got all the different options listed out for respondents to self-select. We've included definitions, tried to be quite neutral and specific in our language. And then respondents can actually describe themselves, and then we can sort of put them into the relevant quotas that we need to. Quality control is, of course, an essential part of the research process. So the market researcher has a real variety of tools at their disposal to strive for high quality data. And at OnePoll, as quantitative online specialists, it's really important that we're aware of the specific drawbacks of that type of research and how to work around them to provide a useful insight for clients such as Essity. You know, it's unfortunately a feature of online research that you're going to have some bad faith actors in there or bots attempting to answer surveys. So this is really why quality control is an important part of data collection, because obviously with online research compared to more traditional face-to-face methods, you know, you can't see every respondent. So you need to make sure that you're verifying their data quality in other ways. So to do this, we have various quality checking measures built into our system, such as accounting for multiple IP addresses, out of country responses, people with multiple accounts, so that we can block those. And then as well as that, as researchers, it's important that we know how to spot poor quality responses when actually going through the data and make sure that we can remove those. By taking these steps, we can just ensure that the results are going to stand up to scrutiny and can be trusted. Now, as the responses come out, for us, it's just a big sheet of raw Excel data. It's kind of our job as researchers to take that and generate insight from it by running it through our analytics software and pulling out key areas of interest. And that's just where it's really important to contextualize the data as a whole piece and see where the links are, rather than looking at specific stats in isolation of each other. To focus on the menopause study, because it's really the project I've been most proud to work on with Gareth this year, or last year, because it was the biggest of its kind done in the UK. So there was a couple of key findings from this project, which Gareth kind of touched on, but I'll go into a little bit more detail on. One of them was there was a real lack of awareness about the menopause and its symptoms, even from women who are currently going through it or have been through it. So, for example, we found that women associate menopause with just 5 symptoms, whereas an expert involved with the project identified a possible 62. And as well as that, just under half said that they felt ill-informed about what their body was going through in the menopause, and 56% actually admitted to being constantly surprised at what they're experiencing. So these findings were then taken and they led to the educational videos and packs put together by the 72-point team to help raise awareness of the menopause and its symptoms, and to, you know, break down these barriers to well-being, which fit in with Essity's overall vision. As well as that, we also found that women were sort of actively avoiding talking about the menopause, or wanted to keep things hidden from people close to them, even, you know, their children, their partner, their friends. And this just, it raised this idea that there was a lack of sharing of knowledge about the menopause. So that led to the more recently launched Changing Rooms project, which, you know, aims to encourage these conversations about the menopause to happen, which, you know, Katie will touch on more. So these examples kind of show how the relationship between a research and creative team and end client can really drive insightful and well-received coverage, which actually has the potential to make a difference in people's lives. More recently, we replicated the menopause research on a wide scale. So we took it to an additional 9 countries spread across Europe and the Americas, which brought the total number of interviews we conducted to 19,500. Now, from a research perspective, this is excellent, of course, because it just gives us this real wealth of data to make comparisons, both across each of these markets that we're looking at, and then over time as we move forwards, because we've just got this real big bank of knowledge now on the menopause. Taking this global was just a great way to deliver on Essity's brand purpose. Obviously, menopause is going to affect all women worldwide. As Essity are placed in around 150 countries, if we'd only got the perspective of women in the UK, that's not going to go far enough to get the answers needed and meet that brand purpose and, you know, get these answers that they're looking for. When taking research global, there are obviously things that need to be taken into consideration to account for, you know, language or cultural differences. By working with local teams at Essity across each of the markets we were polling, we ensured that the language use is correct, the context of the questions remain robust. And a good starting base for this was ensuring that the initial UK survey had quite, you know, more general experience, I suppose, rather than lots of very UK specific things. So then we can compare those answers across the different markets. Now, when working on a global scale, it's important to consider how different laws or changes in culture will affect respondents and the way they answer questions. So, for example, in this menopause research, we asked about taking time off work for menopausal symptoms, and workers' rights or desire to do so is going to vary country by country. So while being able to poll across different markets with the same questions can be really good to uncover differences across them, it's essential to think about any underlying causes for these differences before drawing conclusions. Now, doing the same piece of research across a number of markets doesn't, of course, mean that they all need to be treated in the same way when the results come out. It's important to be aware that different markets can have different aims and want to take that insight delivered and use it in specific ways, especially when, we're looking at 11 different markets like this. That's 11 different cultures, essentially, and ways of looking at the menopause and what they're going to be interested in. So the Dutch team I know spoke about how in the home, menopause isn't really a taboo over there, but it kind of is in the workplace. So obviously they're going to be interested in those differences, whereas in other markets that might not be the case. So they're going to have some different aims. So it's important to be aware of that when taking things to a more global scale. The collaboration between a research agency and client can, in the best of scenarios, lead to research which delivers high quality insight and drives communications to make an impact, revealing something new and interesting about consumer behavior. And I suppose as well, giving a sort of answer about what you do with that information. It's all well and good to conduct a great piece of research, which tells you about certain groups and reveals new information. But if nothing's then done with that information, in a way, what was the point of doing that research unless there's going to be a real world outcome from it? And this, we feel, is the difference between a study just to generate a headline and a real piece of research which has longer lasting implications. Working with Gareth and across the 72-point team just really gave us the ability to tell the story of our research in a way which is actually going to reach people and we feel have a societal impact, which just takes the statistics we provide and gives them life and meaning. Just to summarize my points here. So, it's really important to build those brand researcher relationships to understand client objectives and overall vision as the starting point for a piece of research, which will then be used to create communications. You really need to understand the audience you're polling and any specific things about them which might need to be considered, especially any sensitivities. It's important that the questionnaire you design will meet the client objectives while also not being leading and is open to new ideas which may come out from the data. You should collaborate with experts to build a questionnaire and ensure that it's not missing vital topics. It's really important to be aware of your own unconscious biases and gaps in knowledge and then work with others to get around these. And this is why working with a diverse team of people is really important. You should make sure your insights can deliver and actually tell a story of your research. And where possible and of course relevant, take that research global to uncover new truths about your audience. But if doing so, you need to consider what that means for the research. So thank you very much. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Harry. That's so interesting. This menopause being such a taboo subject across the world. Whether it is conversations at home or outside. And just on the symptoms, it's staggering to know that it's not just about a handful of symptoms. There are like 62 or maybe more that you still, more that we need to know. I'd be very interested to read more of that research. But meanwhile, let's get Katie on board to talk more about the PR and campaigns part of it.
Thank you so much. Just making sure I've taken myself off mute there. So yeah, just going to talk through how we built out a research-led PR campaign. So I'm Katie, I'm the campaigns director at 72-point and devised the menopause campaign. So just taking you through sort of where we start for a research-led campaign. Obviously, if there's an issue in mind, we can obviously start there, but sometimes there isn't. It's about exploring from the beginning and where do we start? So first of all, looking at what's brand relevant. Where can you as a brand play a significant part? What are you comfortable being vocal about? How does it relate to your business? Then what we want to do is really harness the news agenda. So find a sweet spot. So looking at an issue that's not been fully explored, but been touched upon, but where you really identify there's still a huge lack of information. So as you mentioned, menopause, we were starting to talk about it a bit more, but potentially there was so much more that we didn't know, we didn't understand. And that was very clear from stuff that we looked at online. So again, looking at that online sort of side of things, what are people asking? We can explore SEO, we can look at what people are exploring, what are the most asked questions when it comes to sort of publishers and online, all of those places. It's a great place to start. Then we want to sense check it. If you're decided on your idea, we want to make sure there's an appetite from a media point of view, because as much as it obviously, if it's an external campaign, as great as it is, we also need to know that somebody's going to print what we're going to talk about. So we want to make sure that we're not afraid to use contacts and specialists to ask them what they feel about those topics. Do they feel they're overexplored? Do they feel they're underexplored? and how can they help us find a new angle within that topic. Then within that, to sort of build out and make sure that we've got something really extensive, really authentic. We want to ensure that maybe ours is bigger, it's better than everybody else's. It's going to then become the authority. So can our research be bigger, more extensive in that newly focused area? And then in an ideal world, we turn it into something tangible. A report is a great way of giving you a launch pad. Not only is it something you can then build into your PR campaign over the next year, but it's something you can look back on and where you can look and identify as a brand what your campaign and what your research did to sort of change perceptions potentially. Not only that, but a report gives you a drumbeat of news. It gives you something physical you can send out to journalists that help you move the dial. The key for this campaign is obviously was about finding the right insight, and with all of the research-led campaigns we do, finding the right insight to lead them is absolutely vital. For us, obviously, as PRs, we know that human stories are what gets us old school column inches. It's what gets us attention, and it's why we need to find someone who can give you that human angle and give you sort of that real sort of what are people asking, what are actually consumers asking. So effectively, we can use academics where it's relevant, but actually somebody that is speaking to people about what they're finding of an issue is really, really vital as well. So for this one, obviously, we talked about using a doctor who's actually still talking to people about the issues that they face. That person then gives you the ability to make sure that no question is wasted. We're asking that for a reason because they've experienced it. Then when we look about who else we also want to explore, we also want to explore if that person can help build longevity into the campaign. So do they write thesis? Do they contribute to other reports? Do they do other things that are going to allow them to continually cite that research and build longevity into it? We want to make sure that if we are intending on using them, they are media friendly, and obviously we can sort of help do that as well. But also at the same time, you want to make sure they're avoided too much exposure. So at the time, as we mentioned about changing rooms, our research was informed by Dr. Naomi Potter. Dr. Naomi Potter had been very much behind the scenes on the menopause conversations, and nobody really knew who she was. Since changing rooms, she's now gone on to sort of become the face of Estee Lauder, and but just shows that we were right there at the right time, sort of finding that expert as well. The other part of it as well is finding the right expert. Is sometimes the results aren't going to give you the PR massive moments that you want. You might not get the 50%, the 75%, but you might get a 2% difference. Having the right expert is going to allow you to discuss the significance of that 2% difference with a very, very much informed approach, as opposed to sort of being able to, where you can't rely on big stats difference. So as a result, Dr. Naomi Potter gave us so much information that, as Gareth said, we were able to build this out into a 2-part campaign. So the research also is vital for helping us identify who our audience is. Obviously, we know from a brand perspective who we're selling to, who's buying the products, but also who can we talk to about this subject that might potentially broaden our reach. So can we use the research to help identify also where they're consuming their news? Is it worth using questions in there as well? So what we identified with the changing rooms research was effectively there was an incredible lack of intergenerational conversations. It was conversations that had not been had between mother and daughter. So that allowed us to increase our target audience. Initially, we were looking at potentially mothers and people who had been through the menopause, about to go through the menopause. And now all of a sudden we're looking at people who are nowhere near going through the menopause, but they don't understand it in any way. So we sort of went out to sort of 25 plus, and we were able to draw up our target media list from this point once we'd identified that audience. So what we want to do is make that research go as far as possible. We have now the biggest menopause study, and we want to make sure that we're maximising every part of that research. So we divide the findings for a 2-part campaign, and all of these are not divided by age. So not the 2 areas of research that we're doing, but areas of concern from the media, areas that we know that give us 2 really good, valuable platforms to be able to explore. As we discussed, the first part gave us a real place to sort of lay the foundations where we needed to do the education. That research was absolutely vital to talk about what we didn't know, why we didn't know it, and here's how we could find out. So we used we created educational packs Those had quite an internal focus, but also they really did go out. The idea was that we were creating them to have something tangible that we could offer to schools, educators, community groups, support groups. It's a permanent offering that now sits on Essity's website, and we're able to drive back to that many a time when we're creating more and more content from the campaign. The other thing we use a lot in making the research go as far as possible is obviously our media insight. We've used the journalists to help identify whether this topic's of interest, but also we look back on the SEO ideas. So we know that from an online publisher point of view, those what is the stories do particularly well. You can be watching Happy Valley and suddenly get a line saying, who is Sarah Lancashire? Those stories do incredibly well for the publishers. So we built that story around sort of publisher feedback, and we're able to create some explainer videos. So what is the menopause, what is the perimenopause, and what are the symptoms? Because those are amongst the most searched things across those websites. Reason we create them into videos is because for a publisher, that increases their dwell time, as we know, and it really does allow us to include that branded content then. So we've got Essity front and centre of some of their most searched stories, but we're also meeting the publishing needs as well. And that research has helped inform all of those videos, individual insights. Then this is the bit where sort of potentially it's more on the survey side of things, but to ensure that we're getting an all-encompassing reach, we can use some of those stats that inform the videos to put out to media from a print perspective, because obviously they can't include the videos, but it then gives us that wide appeal across all of those. Then the big moment for us. So the second part of the campaign was about bringing in talent and really amplifying. We've laid the foundations with the education now, and now we really want to shout about what we all need to know about the menopause. So we need to make it creative, we need to make it engaging. And talent really can help here. It's not necessary, but it obviously does help if you're trying to reach that target audience. So considering the research identified a lack of intergenerational conversations, we needed to identify somebody that had a strong mother-daughter relationship, somebody that had potentially been vocal about this topic before, who were within budget. We wanted them to have touched on the topic but not over-egged it, but crucially they needed to be a voice of our key target audience, which was originally the women who had been through the menopause or about to go through the menopause. And then we needed to make it fun, to make it as fun as possible. So as you can see, we selected Linda Barker here and built around it the whole Changing Wombs campaign, which was just lovely fit. And it really gave us something to be able to talk about. What we did here is then create the asset. So using the research, we created 3 types of videos about sort of what people thought the menopause was about, and different areas around that, and then divided it into fun ways that they could explore the topic together, to showing those intergenerational conversations again. We created a series of videos, and the reason a series is obviously from a media perspective, it's much more attractive. We had our key moment in mind, which was Lorraine. So obviously being able to say Linda Barker has launched a new series because of this, and this is the reason why. We were able to ensure that the foundations of the research were explored on there, and also that it was authentic, that we had a real reason for why she was doing it. That key moment allowed us to sort of work around, we got the Lorraine moment, and then we built everything else around that. So the media day, everything else would land alongside that big moment. And then obviously we've got the maximising of all the research. So as I said, we had sliced and diced this as much as possible. We had sort of some mainstream offerings, but because we'd had input from journalists at the beginning of what areas would be interesting, which areas they hadn't explored, we were able to use broadsheet features and get everywhere as well. As a result, the campaign had reached 9 million across traditional media. So that's sort of across the online media, etc. And lots of print as well. The YouTube series, I think, currently stands at just over 500,000 of views. And from a social point of view, we are continuing to grow. So we're over 1.2 million as well. And just to give you a snippet of what that looks like, that's how the campaign sort of landed coverage wise. So as you can see, there has been continued interest. It has not ended here, and we are continually now being asked by journalists if they can sort of access some of our research, if there's anything else that we can sort of explore around this topic. And that's the key. That research has allowed us to build that longevity into that campaign. We are now a source for journalists. They're coming to us. We're becoming that trusted voice on the subject because of this big moment as a result of the research as well. So in summary, we want to harness the news agenda, find an expert that's going to build longevity, but crucially give you that human angle that's going to resonate across the media and will allow you to maximize every single one of those questions. Use the research to focus or expand your audience, and don't be afraid to reach out to contacts, use journalists, specialists to help tell you whether or not that's going to land and how else you can sort of challenge that question to make it work harder. Also, a what is sort of search is going to give you the most sort of search topics for that topic, and it's going to help you sort of give some nice media friendly lines for that research as well. To build longevity, we definitely don't just do it as a one sort of survey shop. We need to make sure that that's going to run and run and run. So slice and dice and make sure you're asking something that suits all of those audience. Well, when considering your target, obviously consider your target media up front. So once you've identified the audience using your research, make sure that you're attaching the right talent to it that's going to resonate, especially when it's budget attached to it. We all want to make sure that that's going to work as hard as we can. And finally, just have as much fun as possible with your ideas. This one was certainly a lot of fun, and we've really reaped the reward from that. I think that comes through the ideas as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Katie. Clearly, there's a lot of resonance for this campaign amongst the media and also in the audiences, because there is such a dearth of information for people who are searching to understand more about menopause. We'll open it out to the question Q&A session, and I'll start with Gareth. So Gareth, the first question is that we all know that research-led, data-led, consumer insight-led comps sounds so obviously like the right thing to do, right? So what gets into the way of this approach? Why do people still struggle to use this sort of approach to, to have a weightier, more insightful, more impactful campaign?
Yes, it's a good question. I think it comes back to distinguishing between a survey story and research really being at the heart of your communications agenda. Clearly, the latter carries a lot more weight within organisations like ours, when you can take useful insights to different teams internally, when your sales team can take those insights to retailers, when your health teams can take that to healthcare professionals. That starts to build the value, if you like, internally. I mean, I think the other thing that is pretty typical in our industry is that quite often the PR teams, the comms teams, and PR agencies, they're briefed very specifically on new product launches or on new campaigns, and therefore, as a result, the briefing clients or the organisation tend to want the focus of the resulting media coverage to be very specifically on that new product launch or on that campaign, and that's not always, for me, that's not always a sensible approach. I think creating the platform to have that conversation is a better way to do it, and research and new insights is a way that enables you to open up that dialogue. You know, you have to remember, in our world, a new product is a great thing, and it's really exciting and it's new, but to the media it's not. So you've got to find a way to create a platform that lets you talk about that rather than assuming that that's the news.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. And I'll just take one more question leading from there. So, we've seen an increase in conversations around menopause in the past couple of years. But how do you ensure that, that an organization, when you decide to, embark on this route or choose a topic like menopause, which is something which is a taboo subject, how do you ensure that you're approaching this with authenticity, and that it sits right with you as an organization, and it's not just, trend hopping kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, authenticity comes from action rather than words. So, I think if we generated a few headlines and walked away, then that's not authentic. For us, menopause is a long-term strategy for the business. We've recognised there's a category opportunity. We're building and changing brands and the way we talk to consumers, to retailers. to reposition ourselves as being the thought leader and the expert in this category that we believe can be built. You know, Harry kind of alluded to the point that going into this research, you'd be forgiven for thinking there were 4 or 5 symptoms that needed products that would respond to them. There's actually over 50. And there's very, very few products and solutions out there for people that are experiencing those symptoms. So for an organisation that works in the world of hygiene and health, that's a huge opportunity to be the organisation that responds to that and comes to the market with solutions. So it's a long-term strategy for us. And like I say, I believe authenticity will come from what we do now. And over the next few years, even the next decade, building the category, providing solutions, providing community forums where people can talk about these things and helping build those conversations and in effect just reduce the taboo that surrounds it. I think that's where we'll get to the position where we want to be.
Thank you, Gareth. There is a question from someone who is a question that has been posted, and this is from Elizabeth Laidler. And she says, great campaign. How have you tied the results of the campaign back to Essity's commercial objectives to make the case for investment budget required to deliver it? Budget is the biggest barrier we come across. Are you talking thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands for such a campaign? If you can briefly answer that.
Yeah, great question. Well, we launched this new brand called Isviva, and it's really it's an online platform. So fortunately for us, we could see where the traffic was being driven to the online platform and how that has grown over time. I'm pleased to say after the first phase, we increased traffic by 20%, and by the second phase, we increased it by 30%. So we could very easily see the tangible results of the media coverage and the social media work driving traffic to Isviva. That what we now need to do is look at how that converts into sales, which is clearly a longer term objective. But the initial objective for us, which was to drive traffic and drive awareness of this new brand, and at the same time build our credibility in this area, we can measure, and pleasingly that's been great. In terms of budget, I mean, yes, it's so we're talking tens of thousands, certainly not hundreds. We don't have huge budgets at Essity. We're not one of these massive global consumer juggernauts, really. So we don't have those kind of £500 million budgets that some brands do. Certainly nowhere near that. So we have to make it work really well. And again, for me, that comes back to the value of research. You can put a small amount of money into getting some really credible research, and it gives you a real suite and a catalogue of headlines. You're not just getting one insight, you're getting 20. And then it's how you use those different insights to build a campaign that has longevity, that you can get a lot of value for money.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. And you've stressed so much about good research and impactful research. So Harry, what were some of the key considerations while designing the research on menopause?
Of course, yeah. So obviously this research on menopause, we're touching on what's quite a sensitive, very personal subject for some people. So there's sort of special considerations compared to other research, which doesn't go into things in these sort of levels of depth. So from the research side, it's things like making sure that we're using inclusive language, and I suppose as well making sure we're using the correct language, nothing that's going to be offensive or sort of outdated terms. And then as well as that, making sure that we handle topics sensitively, making sure we're including to have prefer not to say options for people who might not want to share these experiences, that we have a disclaimer up the front of the survey so that people know the sort of things they're going to be asked, and we want to make sure that people are comfortable answering these questions. Basically, we want to make sure that no one's made to feel uncomfortable by the research we're doing. And then as well as that, from a design stage as well, I suppose it's working with experts like Dr. Naomi Potter in this case, making sure that we're not just having a diverse group of people trying to build this question set, but making sure that it's the right people who have expert knowledge on this subject and know what they're talking about. So yeah, I suppose those are the little specific considerations with this research.
Yeah, you've spoken about looking at your biases, getting experts on board so that they know what they're talking about. For multi-market research such as what you have just conducted, how important is cultural intelligence? You spoke about laws, ethics, etc., etc.
Yes, I suppose yes. So we think it's very important, of course, because depending on where you're asking certain questions, the culture is going to change how acceptable it is to ask certain things, or the reason for people's answers are going to be different. So I suppose building on the one that I sort of touched briefly on earlier about taking time off for menopause, one of the key things that's going to change based on is just employment laws. People are either able or not going to be able to take that time off work because of their menopausal symptoms. So that's going to change how much they're doing it. But as well as that, culturally, perhaps in some more conservative societies that we're polling, people may not be as willing to talk about this. If menopause is more of a taboo there, then they're not going to be able to speak to their employers about why it is that they might need that time off. So those are the reasons why they're not going to be taking the time off. It's not necessarily down to whether they want to or not. It's down to, whether they're able to, I suppose, legally in terms with what days they're allowed to take off, and culturally what they feel they're allowed to do. So that's why working with these local teams is really important, because they will have that insight that us coming at this just from a UK perspective isn't going to have. So that's why if you're doing this global research, you need to involve the local teams rather than trying to do everything from a sort of central hub of the UK, I suppose, and assuming that the way that people think about things here is the same as is everywhere.
Thank you, Harry. That makes a lot of sense. And just to those attending, I think there are some questions and our panelists are trying to answer some of those directly because we are running short of time. And I'll come to you, Katie, with a very important question. And this is where I think everyone wants to hear about this. How do you monitor efficacy and measure success? For this particular study, how did you measure, what was your measurement of success? Was it the engagement? You spoke about social media. Gareth did mention, he's spoken about, the 20 to 30% increase on people visiting the site or sales. So how do you measure something at the end of it? Yeah, how do you make sense of it all for the person in the team who's going to ask you, where did all the money go?
Of course. Well, I think hopefully this campaign sort of speaks for itself in many ways in terms of what you can see. Obviously, lots of it's visual, those TV moments, those special moments. But yeah, a lot of it is, did we take the corporate brand into a new place? Have they reached a new audience? How engaged were the target audience? Did it relate to them? There's no point us launching a menopause campaign and landing it, on the wrong pages. It had to be focused. And did we get that focused reach? I think that's one of the biggest things. Also, did those articles, they're not there to look pretty, they're not there to sit in the back of the website. Did they have a call to action included in them? Did they have a link included them? And they did. They all linked directly to the new platform. I think also, as you say, it's reach. We measure by reach as well. And the benefit of it's not just reach from sort of just those social media figures or how many readers we have, but how many people then pick it up organically. So on the coverage slide, we obviously had, it was then picked up in, we ran in the Mail, ran in the Mail Plus, ran in Daily Mail, but then the Mail on Sunday looked at it and it was featured in a column by one of their columnists. So that just shows you that that's been seen by people outside of, the people we're directly pitching to. And not only that, but the benefit of using research and the benefit of working closely with our research arm is that we actually use research to then identify, check brand awareness and share a voice after we've run such big campaigns, sort of working with Gareth now, I think for a year. We ran some research which shows obviously since we've been working with them, share of voice has doubled, brand awareness has hugely increased. We're able to sort of test ourselves on that, and research is vital for that too.
Thank you. Gareth, Harry, any comments on this? Any additions?
No, I think Katie summed it up really well there. The point about the building of the awareness and familiarity of the corporate brand is another kind of great way to measure the success of these campaigns. We know in comms and in PR, we're not always going to drive sales the same day. Something doesn't appear in the newspapers and that same day sales spikes. That's a long-term impact. But what we can see is driving traffic to websites, engagement on social media, and then again long-term, the kind of building and development of that corporate brand, which is really important for us. So yeah, I think that's been the kind of the critical outcomes for us.
Okay, there's one question from an attendee. Do you think you would have got all the coverage without a celeb? Was the celeb the crucial element to achieve a media burst?
I can take that one if you like. I think you can see from the two parts of the campaign, actually no celeb attached to the first one, and we got a huge amount of coverage as a result of that. So I think it was there's a very equal split in terms of when you count about how much coverage we had. I think what that did is bringing the celebrity in, is you had somebody that could be vocal about it. And as I said from the beginning, it's about a human angle. It's a human story, and you put it on one person, it does give you some life to it. It gives a voice to it. And effectively, yes, the second part of the campaign was really, there was a huge talent focus, and it did allow us to get into new places. But research formed the foundation of both parts of those campaigns. So without the research is more vital than the talent, but the talent does give you an extra voice.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Just on, there's one more question from Liz Murphy. She says, congratulations on the campaign. I thought it was great. Sorry if I missed it, but how long did it take to plan, research, and create all the elements of this campaign before go live?
I can take that one as well if you want, I think. I think we originally started talking about it sort of end of summer and September time. Looking back, we sort of launched the first sort of 62 symptoms element of it in October, which means that we probably would have got the research about 6-7 weeks before that. So the research would have gone into field, yeah, around sort of August, September time. And the insight created around that time. Obviously, then we take quite a few weeks to sort of build all of the assets. So the education packs, the videos, that takes sort of, yeah, can take anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks. And then we launch when that's ready, and we feel that there's a really momentous occasion. We were working towards Menopause Week, if I remember correctly, Gareth, that's kind of when the first part went. So all in all, it's been sort of 6 months. In terms of the second part, we then filmed ahead of Christmas. We had arranged our media day ahead of Christmas, so we had all of our journalists kind of like locked down before then. And then we carried that out the first week in January, so we were ready to go once we had the Lorraine stuff all done. So everything was kind of organised. We know that the first week back is a pretty torrid time to get hold of journalists. So we wanted to make sure that whereas before Christmas, they are absolutely delighted to hear from you because they've got no content. So we wanted to make sure that we had all of that ready to go. And then the videos were obviously created before Christmas as well.
Brilliant. That sounds great. So we've answered all the questions. Any last minute thoughts, comments? And we're on time. A minute over, actually. No, I think none. So thank you very much. Thank you to all you panelists. Thank you to the attendees for this wonderful session. I'm looking forward to learning more about this menopause study and seeing how it works. And I'll follow it in the media too. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you, PRCA, Michael, Korai. Thank you for all your support. Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.